How do you cut nicely fitting dados or grooves like these in a variety of different sizes with a router? Well, you could buy a bunch of different bits and build a variety of jigs. Or you could use Rockler's Perfect Fit Dado Jig and just 3 router bits. In this demo video, I'm going to show you how it works. Routing dados or grooves can be a challenge, particularly when you need to fit them to today's undersized plywood, like this piece of 23 32 inch Baltic birch. If you use a 3/4 inch straight bit with this plywood, the dado or groove is going to be too loose. Or maybe you need to route a dado or a groove that's wider than any straight bit you own, like say 5/8 inch or 7/8 inch. You could use a narrower bit, but you're going to have to sneak up on the right fit. And if you happen to cut it too wide, you're back to square one again, and you're going to have to start over. And that's where Rockler's Perfect Fit Dado Jig comes in handy, because it solves these problems. It'll cut dados or grooves in sizes ranging from about 5/16 inch up to about 1 inch wide, or any size in between, with just 3 standard size router bits. And those are 1/4 inch, 3/8 inch, and 1/2 inch straight or spiral bits. The reason why this jig can cut so many sizes of dados or grooves accurately is because you set the jig using a sample of the actual workpiece that will fit in the dado or groove. So the jig conforms to the workpiece, and so do one of these 3 bit sizes you'll use for the cutting process. But before I show you how all that works and we make a sample cut, let's take a closer look at the jig. You attach your router to the jig using this clear base plate, and it comes pre-drilled to fit a variety of popular mid-size routers. I'm going to use a Milwaukee router in this demonstration. That clear router base plate mounts to this blue jig base with built-in dust collection. And this black Perfect Fit fence slides in or out to set up the cutting width. It's locked in place with 2 long star knobs and this shorter pair of knurled steel knobs. Rockler also equips this jig with this gray tension fence. It slides in or out to fit over a straight edge that guides the jig through the cutting process. I'm going to be using this Bora aluminum straight edge with a built-in clamping system. Now let's go over how to set up this jig to cut a specific width dado or groove. It's actually a pretty simple process. You can see here that this black adjustable fence has 3 steps in it. And next to these steps is printed 1/4 inch, 3/8 inch, and 1/2 inch. These fractions correspond to the 3 sizes of bits you can use with this jig. So let's say I want to cut a 1/2 inch wide dado for this 1/2 inch thick piece of MDF using a 1/4 inch bit. To set the dado width, I set my scrap of 1/2 inch MDF into the step next to the 1/4 inch bit mark. Then I slide the black adjustable fence and the scrap over against the blue jig base. To lock the setting, I tighten these 2 star knobs. I also need to slide these 2 silver knurled knobs all the way over towards the black jig fence and tighten those down as well. I could also use a 3/8 inch bit to route this 1/2 inch wide dado. So I'd take my scrap of 1/2 inch MDF and set it on the 3/8 inch step of the fence instead of the 1/4 inch step, slide the fence and scrap over, and tighten all 4 knobs. What you don't want to do with the Perfect Fit Dado Jig is choose a 1/2 inch bit to route a 1/2 inch wide dado or groove. Why? Well, this jig cuts in 2 passes to create that perfect fit. And in order to do that, you need to choose a bit with a diameter that's at least half the width of the dado or groove you want to route, but less than the full width. So, both 1/4 inch and 3/8 inch bits meet that criteria. They're at least half the width of a 1/2 inch wide dado like this, but not the full width. Now, let's say I want to cut a dado for this piece of 23 32 inch thick Baltic birch plywood. Well, I could choose either the 3/8 inch bit or the 1/2 inch bit, because either of these bits is at least half the width of the dado, but not the full width. I promise that we're getting really close to using this jig, but we still need to talk about the 2 routing passes that are required to make any dado or groove. And those are marked right here on the jig's black adjustable fence. Let me explain how those work. once the cutting width for a dado or groove is set on the jig using a scrap piece. The first cut is made with the jig in the closed position. That's set by sliding the blue jig base against the black fence until they meet here, and tightening the star knobs. In the closed position, the jig will cut the inside edge of the dado or groove right here. The second cut will clear out the rest of the waste and finish the dado or groove, and it's easy to set up. Now we need the jig to be in its open position. To set it, loosen the star knobs and slide the blue jig base away from the black fence as far as it'll go, and tighten the star knobs again. These silver knurled knobs set the limit of this open position, and the bit will cut the outside edge of the dado or groove here. So let's go ahead and route a dado for this piece of 23 32 inch Baltic birch plywood. And let's use a 1/2 inch straight bit to make the cut. To set the width of the dado, I'll take my Baltic plywood piece, set it on the black fence's 1/2 inch step, and squeeze the fence and blue jig base together. Then tighten the star knobs. We also need to slide the silver knurled knobs to the end of their slots closest to the black fence and tighten them down. Remember, these set the limit of the jig's open position. So that sets the cutting width on our dado jig. I've also marked the dado's location on this piece of plywood using our Baltic scrap as a template. The straight edge guide needs to be offset 3 1/4 inches away from the dado when using a 1/2 inch bit. I've marked that offset here so I can clamp my straight edge into place. I've also set the bit's cutting depth to 1/8 inch. The first routing pass will happen with the jig in its closed position. To make that setting, I loosen the star knobs, squeeze the blue jig base against the black fence, and retighten the star knobs. Now I can start the router and make the closed pass, pushing the jig and router along the cut from the front infeed side of my workpiece to the back outfeed side. Make this cut slowly and smoothly. We're halfway done. Now we need to reset the jig to the open position. To do that, I'll loosen the 2 star knobs and pull the black jig fence away until the knurled knobs reach the end of their slots in the blue jig base. Then I can tighten the star knobs again. To make the open cut, I start with the router on the outfeed side of my workpiece this time and slowly pull it back toward me to mill the rest of the dado to its final width. And now, drum roll, the moment of truth to see how the sample dado fits. That's a good push fit. Now I'm going to be honest, sometimes these dados or grooves fit too tight, but that's not a problem with the jig. Here's what you need to check. For the second open cut, make sure the fence is pulled out as far as it will go. If it's not quite open all the way, the fit will be too tight. And second, make sure the bits you use for the jig are exactly 1/4 inch, 3/8 inch, or 1/2 inch in diameter. Sometimes bits can be slightly undersized, especially if they're already well used. And if the bit's diameter is even a few thousandths of an inch too narrow, the dado or groove will be too narrow. So here's what you can do. Apply a few strips of masking tape to the scrap piece you used for setting up the jig. The tape will act like shims to open the jig's fence just a little bit wider to help account for a router bit that's a little bit too narrow. Rockler's Perfect Fit Dado Jig is versatile, accurate, and easy to use. You can see it at your local Rockler store or learn more about it at rockler.com. I'm Chris Marshall with Rockler and Woodworker's Journal magazine, and thanks for watching.